Okay, so just want to remind everyone that we are recording this meeting. And want to welcome everyone again. For those we've not met before, my name is Gabriel Kikana. I'm originally from Rwanda, and I have a bachelor degree in biochemistry and molecular biology and biochemistry from California Baptist University. I then moved on to a PhD in cell biology at Indiana University. And I'm now a postdoctoral researcher at UT Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas, Texas. So my training has been mainly in the United States. And as most of you know, the US really distinguishes itself as a global leader in research, both private and academic public research. And so what I present today is going to be focused on the United States, but it should be relevant to many other parts of the country. And so this is the first webinar in a series of 4 webinars. So if you've attended today, we will continue to remind you, if you've registered, your registration suffices for all 4 of them. You don't have to register again. We have your email. You will receive the link and a reminder for the next ones. And in this presentation, I'll come back to that and show you the dates for the other webinars. Okay. For those of you who might be new to Afrisnet, I just want to tell you briefly what Afrisnet is and what we do. So we are an international nonprofit organization, and our main goal is to increase the overall participation of Africans in modern and competent research in STEM. If you are not an African and you've joined us today, welcome. The information should still be relevant to you. For those of you who are undergraduate students who are joining us from Africa, a special welcome to you. And once again, I really laud and encourage your efforts to get into graduate school. That's exactly what we want, is to see more Africans offering their genuine and relevant contributions to discovery research across the globe. So our website is afrisnet.org. You can visit to learn more about the organization if you have not done so already. If you go here to the Join Afrisnet menu, you will be able to create an account with Afrisnet. What that does primarily is that it gives us your basic information, so name, institution, country, email address, and then you get added automatically to our mailing list, so you will stay in the loop on everything that Afrisnet is doing. But it also gives you access to other people who have registered. And so when you register for a single event, we have your email and we will remind you about that event. But when you register for Afrisnet, you're actually entering a large network, and you should be able to message and connect with other people who are in the network within the website. Okay, the programs that are established at Afrisnet now include the Graduate Application Mentorship Program. And so this webinar series actually come within the framework of this program. This is where students who are applying to graduate school are paired with individual mentors who can guide them throughout the application process. Our third webinar is going to be specifically for this program. We will explain to you how it works and the requirements and what you can expect from this program. Sumaya, who is joining me, has volunteered now to steer this program. And so we're looking forward to hopefully be able to mentor some of you who are joining the meeting today. We also have a summer undergraduate research experience program, or SURE. In this program, we recruit African students and bring them to the United States during the summer, where they spend 8 to 10 weeks in a laboratory receiving research training. This is still limited. We are not able to bring many students yet. We are working on that. Last year, we recruited 3 students, 2 from Ghana, 1 from Kenya. This year, we're looking at at least 5. In fact, I'm excited now as I speak. 2 students are flying from Ghana to North Carolina for their internship. We also have a global community of graduate students and postdocs from Africa. And although these programs, AGPC says graduate and postdoc, we actually also include postdocs. So if you are on this call and you've already completed your undergraduate training, you're in between graduate and undergraduate, you can register to join the AGPC. And again, go to the website, look for the What We Do menu. You'll find a button that's going to take you to the AGPC. And once you get there, you'll find the AGPC registration link. Or just shoot us an email at info@afrisnet.org, which is on the screen here. And we will give you the registration link for the AGPC. If you are a master's student looking for a PhD in the future, this is a community for you. And if you know any other graduate students and postdocs, you can invite them to join as well. We also have launched a series of global research webinars. So here we invite prominent researchers from all over the world. One problem we've noticed is that young people in Africa don't have adequate exposure to the global scientific community. And so if you are going to school in Western countries, or say in China or India, mostly you're able to attend conferences or regular seminars where really prominent speakers are invited from all over the world to present their research. This is not the case in Africa. And so I understand that many of the African students are lacking on this exposure and inspiration from outstanding researchers. But if for instance, graduate students in the United States or even undergraduate students in the United States are able to participate in these webinars and conferences where they get to meet all kinds of really prominent researchers, Nobel laureates, and what have you. And so we started this webinar series to sort of open up a channel for African students to have that opportunity. And so we'll try and invite prominent researchers. And again, if you're on our mailing list, if we've scheduled one, you will be notified. There are a few more programs that we are working on, and they will be communicated when they are launched. But let's come back to the the graduate information sessions, or GIS. So you're going to hear this word a lot now, GIS. It's gonna come up again. We do this series every year. The goal is to give you relevant first-hand information about graduate school and how to apply to graduate school. So today is May 25th. We are in the first session. We're going to define graduate school, the mechanism, how it works in general, the requirements, the differences between graduate school and undergraduate school. So you can already start to reset your mindset if you are thinking about graduate school. On June 1st, please make this note, and I apologize for the mistake we made. In the general email we sent out about a week ago, I believe we wrote June 8th. That is a mistake. I will be traveling on June 8th. I cannot give that webinar. So we've moved it only to June 1st, which is next Saturday at the same time. And again, you don't have to register again. If you have already registered, you are going to receive the Zoom link within 48 hours prior to the webinar on Saturday. There will be a different Zoom link for every webinar for security purposes. So next Saturday, don't join the link that we sent out today. It's not going to work. That Zoom link is going to be deleted. We will create a new link for every webinar for security reasons. If you do share our links with other people who want to join and have not registered, that's fine. Just remind them that when they join, they need to rename themselves. We don't admit people in our meetings who don't identify themselves by their names, okay? So we've seen people who come in, their name says iPhone or Samsung Galaxy or Zoom user or anything like that. Any name that we can't identify, we will not admit you into the meeting for two reasons. For security purposes, we don't want people now to be messing up our meetings, but also it's for professional purposes, right? If you are attending a meeting, the least you can do professionally is identify yourself, okay? And then notice that the third one is not going to be on Saturday. It's going to be on a Wednesday, again at the same time. And so I should say on June 1st, we will delve into how you apply to graduate school. And I'll come back to this one with more details. On June 12th, on Wednesday, we are going to expose the and explain the Afrisnet graduate application mentorship. So what it takes to be selected for that mentorship. And then on June 22nd, this is one of my favorite sessions. We're going to have a panel discussion. So we're going to invite professors, graduate students, and postdocs who have applied to graduate school successfully. These professors have served on admission committees. So they've read hundreds of graduate applications. So they know what it takes. They know what they're looking for in a candidate to give them admission. So it's a rare opportunity. But all these sessions will be very useful to you. So I highly recommend that you add these to your calendars already if you have not done so already. And let's get into now today's session about graduate school. So first things first, what is graduate school? So you can define graduate school in many ways, but I view it as an academic entity, typically within a university or a college that awards postgraduate degrees, meaning master's or doctorate degrees. And so not every university has a graduate school. There are universities that offer only undergraduate degrees. And there might be also academic institutions that are not necessarily, that don't necessarily have the university status, but still offer some sort of postgraduate degrees. So they would also have a graduate school, okay? So here I'm giving you an example of where I am at UT Southwestern, or the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. This is a world premier research medical center in Dallas, Texas, with so many labs and all kinds of multidisciplinary biomedical research. But within this institution, there is a graduate school in biomedical sciences. There might be other graduate schools within the same university, okay? And so this is going to make sense more with maybe this example. This is Indiana University Bloomington, where I went to school. And what I did here is I screenshot their graduate school website to give you an example. If you focus here on the top, you notice that this is the whole university, Indiana University in Bloomington. Within within Indiana University, you have the graduate school in Indiana University. Okay, and within this graduate school, you have multiple programs within the graduate school. So, for example, you could get there is a program that offers a doctorate of philosophy or PhD in gender studies. When I was there, I did my PhD in the genome, cell, and developmental biology. But notice that the same program, GCDB, also has a master's program, right? And then a master's in geography. This is one example in so many graduate degrees that the graduate school at Indiana University offers. So what you would want to keep in mind here as a prospective graduate student, when you apply, even if you are applying to a university, really you are applying to a specific graduate program. So what I mean is, when you submit an application to the Genome, Cell, and Developmental Biology program at Indiana University, very specific people within this graduate program are the ones that are going to read your application. Okay. So that's important to keep in mind, because when you don't want to spend a lot of time learning about the university in general. You want to learn about the university, you want to know the basics, but really what you need is to spend time learning about the specific graduate programs within the university graduate school that you're going to apply to. And so now I want to take a short summary and compare graduate school and undergraduate education. I have a disclaimer here that my lists are not exhaustive. There might be things that um, I did include either for the interest of time or things that I'm not aware of. Why do I do this? I do this to sort of begin resetting your minds. If you are thinking about graduate school, what is going to be different? What are you going to be doing in graduate school? How does that differ from what you are doing now if you are still an undergraduate student? And I think having that mentality is very important, because if you apply to graduate school, the way you write your application is going to reflect the knowledge you have about graduate school. And if your mind is really prepared, it's going to be reflected in what you write. It's going to be reflected in how you behave and how you respond to the questions you'll be asked during the interview if you get to that stage. So it's important to have that grasp in general of what grad school is and how it works. And so in your undergraduate education, you are acquiring general and very broad knowledge that pertains to a certain discipline, right? And so you might be a student now in biology, you might be in chemistry or civil engineering or computer science. All these are very, very, very broad disciplines, right? And so if you are in civil engineering, for example, some civil engineering encompasses pavement, right? It has the building of houses, right? If you go in the building of houses, you can also subdivide it into building commercial buildings versus residential buildings. Chemistry has analytical chemistry, organic chemistry, industrial chemistry, right? Computer science also has so many subdivisions. If you go to graduate school, your target is to become an expert in a specific area within a broad discipline, right? And so if you're doing an undergrad in civil engineering, once you go to graduate school, you may focus on pavement engineering, for example. So you're focusing only on how to engineer roads and walkways and things like that. If you are an undergraduate in chemistry, your PhD or master's may focus on high voltage lithium battery, for example. This is just one example. Or you may go in organic synthetic chemistry or other subfields of chemistry. If you are in computer science, your graduate degree could be, for instance, in artificial intelligence, right? So the higher you go as a graduate student, the more specific your studies become, and again, the goal there is to become a leader, an expert, right? So once you're done with your undergrad, you've gained sufficient knowledge for professional practice, right? And so if you have an undergraduate degree in civil engineering, you could go and work for a civil engineering firm that does work in an area in which you've taken some courses, right? And so you're ready to do work that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do if you did not have that degree. And so most jobs will even specify that you must have that degree. When you go to grad school, depending on the type of graduate school, you may also attain knowledge for professional practice. For example, medical doctors, right? And so there's a lot of students looking at different fields that our registrants are in. There is quite a number of people who are now in Ghana in optometry, for instance. You're going to become an OD, so optometry doctor. You after that you can go out and practice, right? And so, or a dentist, for example, they go to graduate school to get information for professional practice. But what really distinguishes the research focused graduate school, which is what we're going to focus on today, is that you build on existing knowledge to generate novel knowledge. I cannot emphasize this enough. If you don't have a desire to discover novel knowledge, maybe you don't need to go to graduate school, okay? Or you don't need to go to graduate school to do research. So this is a key distinction of graduate school. It's such a privileged position to be in when you can say that you've discovered something that no one else knew before you. It's very exciting. And towards the end, I will share examples with some of my own discoveries. But this is what research-focused graduate education is about, is to make novel discoveries. And so other things that vary between graduate and undergraduate are the enrollment requirements. And so oftentimes for undergraduate, you need a high school degree. For graduate, you need an undergraduate degree. And so some of you may already be saying, oh, wait, I thought I need a master's to get into a PhD. As I'm going to discuss in a minute, you do not. You can get into a PhD with an undergraduate degree. Some undergraduate require standard tests. That's true also for graduate school. So you may have heard of things like the GRE, or if you go into a country that speaks French, they may require you to take some French tests. If you go into an English-speaking country, they may ask you to take an English proficiency test. These are standardized tests that will test your sort of general and basic knowledge in a given area before you embark on grad school. Some undergraduate, the most competitive ones, may require some recommendation letters. Most graduate programs will ask for recommendation letters before they give you admission. In our second, so next Saturday on June 1st, we're going to delve deeper into recommendation letters and other documents and explain them. But briefly here, if you've never heard of a recommendation letter before, or maybe you've heard a different definition, this is where academic programs want people, preferably leading experts, to speak on your behalf about your competence for the offer that you are looking for. And so if you're trying to get into graduate school, can a professor who has taught you courses or someone who has supervised you on a research project, can that person speak on your behalf and explain how strong you are as an applicant? When you begin your undergraduate, this may not be true in every country, but in some countries, you don't need to know what you're going to study. You can come in and take many general courses before you actually decide what your major is going to be. For graduate school, it's different. You enroll in a very specific program. As I mentioned before, you're actually already applying to a very specific program, right? And so you cannot, for instance, you can go to a university and say, my major is biology or chemistry, but it's very unlikely that you're going to apply to a chemistry program for your master's, your PhD. It's going to be much more specific. So as the examples that I've provided on the previous slides. In most cases, you have to pay for your undergraduate education unless you get scholarships. For graduate school, this is becoming much more common in many countries, especially more developed countries. You don't have to pay tuition, right? And that's the case in the United States, and I'll explain that when we get there. So the length of study also varies between undergraduate and graduate. So you can complete your undergraduate in 3 to 5 years in most cases. Graduate school typically takes, 1 to 6 years, depending on whether you're doing a master's or a PhD, or the requirements of the program. How you learn and how many people teach you is also another difference between undergraduate and graduate school, right? And so right now, most of you undergrads will be in attending really large classes, tens to hundreds of students. In graduate school, typically classes are very small, usually only a few students, 10 to 20 students. Some of them are as small as 5 students. And these huge lectures in undergraduate, typically one professor is teaching many students. In graduate school, you will be mentored by one or a few advisors. And you have a defined list to complete as an undergraduate student to get your degree. Typically, this is a very long list, dozens of courses that you have to take throughout the undergraduate training. In grad school, you may also have a defined list, but this list is usually shorter than the list for undergrad. To get your degree as an undergrad, you may need to also undertake a senior project, which is also sometimes called as a senior thesis. So some of you may already be doing that or have completed that or are thinking about that. This tends to be typically inquiry-oriented projects, some sort of research. They could also be capstone projects where you review a wide amount of literature in a given field and summarize it. Every program is going to have it different. For your graduate school, you will most likely have a mandatory research project to conduct, especially for your PhD. That's almost a given because that's how you get a PhD, is by making novel discoveries. So you have to have a research project for that. As a graduate student, you also get trained on teaching and on how to do research. That may not be the case as an undergrad. Some of you may be TAs as undergrads. I was a TA when I was an undergraduate student, but no one really was teaching me how to teach, right? And, you're doing well as a student and a professor asks you to help. You can or cannot do it. But as a graduate student in some programs, teaching is mandatory. You have to teach. And of course, you have to do research. And so another key difference between undergraduate and graduate school is that as a graduate student, you are self-organized. You're responsible for doing your research and determining how fast you move. And of course, you will be given a time frame in which you have to finish your graduate school, but you are self-organized. Especially after you're done with your basic coursework and you're just doing your research. In most cases, you're not going to have someone who is going to give you a schedule and tell you at 8 a.m. today you have to do this experiment. At 10 a.m. tomorrow you have to do this experiment. You plan your own work and make your own schedule. So you have to be motivated and self-organized. So now, after the presentation of sort of this general differences and similarities between undergrad and graduate school, I want to take a moment and do a detailed presentation on graduate school in the United States. Why do I choose the United States? Number one, as I mentioned earlier, the US is a leader in global discovery research, and that's going to be obvious with the examples I'm going to give you. Number two, because graduate programs in the US have worked so well and very prolifically, their model has been applied in many other countries. And so what I present here is going to be similar to some graduate programs in Canada, in Europe, in Australia, or even in countries like China and other Asian countries. And so let's talk about how prolific this country is in terms of graduate education. There's over 1,000 universities in the US that offer graduate degrees, right? So if you paid attention to what I presented earlier, I told you that one university can have hundreds of graduate programs. Now there is over 1,000 universities that have graduate schools. So there's literally thousands and thousands of graduate programs in this country. And that's important because it gives you options. It gives you a wide range of options and programs you can explore when you're trying to define your research interest in graduate school. This is also important, something that was actually one of the reasons that motivated me to to start Afrisnet, is that my co-founder and I realized that many African students were not aware that you don't have to pay tuition to come to graduate school in the United States, especially for PhD degrees in STEM. And so when I went to graduate school, I did not pay a dime for that. Instead, I was given a monetary stipend every month, which allowed me to afford the basic living expenses. So I was able to rent an apartment. I was able to purchase a car as a PhD student from the monetary stipend that I was receiving. You're not going to become rich, but you will have enough money to survive. In fact, I should say, sometimes students will come to us and say, yeah, I have research experience, I'm doing well, but I really have this family matter that I need to solve first. I have to support my family financially. That's noble, that's understandable. And when you dig deeper, they are making like $100 a month in Africa, and they're still using that money to support their family. I'm not trying to discourage you here from supporting your families, but I'm telling you, if you come to the US as a PhD student, the stipend you will receive might be higher than the salary you were receiving in your home country. So in that regard, you might be able to actually support your family better by coming here as a PhD student. You can get a roommate, for instance, that lowers the monthly expenses that you have to deal with every month. And so just to give you an example, a PhD student at UT Southwestern, where I am in Dallas, Texas, is paid, I believe now it's over $30,000 a year. It might be close to $40,000 a year, right? And so that's more than $3,000 every year, right? And so how many of you have jobs in Africa that are gonna pay them $3,000 a year? So just think about that, right? And so this is not limited to STEM degrees. There might be tuition waivers and monetary stipends in non-STEM degrees. There are usually fewer, but you can inquire, you can search, you may find some. Also, master's degrees.
Oh yeah. And what are you doing about it?
Master's degrees also, master's program may also provide some stipends and monetary support. There are some students that Afrisnet has mentored who have gotten funding for masters. Just keep in mind, these are fewer, similar to non-STEM degrees. And as I mentioned earlier, admission to a PhD program does not require a master's degree. And so I don't have a master's degree. I finished my undergraduate and went straight to a PhD. In terms of length in the US, a master's is going to take you 1 to 3 years. A PhD is going to take you 4 to 6 years is very typical. I should say here, most PhD programs have internal systems that will allow you, that will give you some flexibility. And so if you need more than 6 years, life happens, right? So some people will get into their 5th year of graduate school and, they have a baby, right? And so dealing with a newborn child and writing your thesis, for instance, as a mother is not easy, right? And so many universities are going to have systems that will allow you to sort of delay your graduation a little bit if you need to, but you will still have that financial support if you qualify for it. And so some general aspects to keep in mind here. Applications are typically due for graduate school are due late November and early February. And this is for you to begin graduate school in the next academic year. So some master's programs have a rolling admission system, meaning you can apply anytime and they will consider your application. The academic year in the US for most programs runs from August to May. And so we are in May now. Most programs have now completed the academic year. And so you cannot apply now to start graduate school in August this year. That would not be possible for most PhD programs. But if you apply for the next cycle, meaning if you submit your application by November or December 2024, you would begin graduate school in the fall of 2025. So yeah, this is an example from last year. So if you apply this to this year, if you apply at the end of 2024, you would start in 2025. And so now, why do I keep claiming that the US is a global leader in research? And I'll give you a few examples here. One obvious distinction is just how much money this country invests in research. Over $600 billion in 2019 alone, right? This is insane. This is, just to give you an example, most African countries have, in fact, many countries in the world have budgets that are less than $10 billion, right? For a whole country. This is one country investing $500 billion in research in a year. And here to the right, I'm showing you the Nobel Prizes in physics, right? You can argue with me that Nobel Prizes are not the best metric in science discovery or science breakthroughs. I agree with that to a certain degrees, but at least people who receive Nobel Prizes have participated at least in some sort of research that has been truly groundbreaking and has served the global, the human race, across the globe in profound ways, right? And so people who've invented technologies like CRISPR, for example, super resolution microscopy, right, and other groundbreaking techniques receive Nobel Prizes. And if you look in physics, in the United States alone, that's this one tall bar here is the United States, right? And so clearly distinct. It's not just the Nobel Prizes, right? You can forget about the Nobel Prizes. There is many other more meaningful direct distinctions that would affect you as a student, right? So there's this globally renowned research faculty. And so that means that your graduate mentor would be someone who's a true force on a global level in research, right? So there's also this cutting edge research technology in infrastructure. So an example on the picture here that I put here to the left, you're looking at this man here. His name is Jim. Jim was the director of the microscopy center where I did my PhD in Indiana University. And here he's showing to 3 interns, Jonah, Eric, and Bachula. These were the Afrisnet summer interns in 2019. And Jim is showing them this really, really cutting edge microscope that at the time was able to do a microscopy technique called SIM, or a structural illumination microscopy. This was a super resolution imaging technique that basically, when it was invented, beat the laws of physics, meaning that it allowed scientists to image at a resolution that is lower than the wavelength of light. Right? If any of you is familiar with light microscopy, that's a major breakthrough. And so that technology actually also won a Nobel Prize. And so as a PhD student, I was able to use this microscope when only a number of universities in the world had such a microscope. So that was pretty cool. It was kind of cool to be able to use that microscope and make discoveries with that technology that other people had not been able to make before, right? So as I mentioned earlier, with more than 1,000 universities and many thousands of graduate programs, you're going to have a vast range of research discipline. This is true even within the graduate program that you're going to join. Most of them will let you rotate. And so even if you take one graduate program, within that one graduate program, you're going to have, in most cases, dozens of laboratories that are doing research on different topics, right? So it becomes as vast, as diverse as it can be. What I also like to highlight for the United States is their less hierarchical culture. And so people, even the colleagues that I work with who are in Africa, they will all still call me Dr. Gihana or Dr. Gabriel, and I'm always telling them, please call me Gabriel, right? And so if I've emailed any of you, you've noticed that I don't sign my email as Dr. Gabriel Gihana. I'll just sign them by my first name. That's true all the way to the PhD advisors, right? And so my PhD advisor, Dr. Sonny Lacefield, when I was working in her lab, I would call her Sonny by her first name. And so if you're in Africa, you may think, oh, that's disrespectful. It's not. It's the culture here. And what that does is that it increases collegiality and openness, because you are sort of operating on the same level as everyone else. And so that eases the communication. It boosts the confidence in people who are still being trained, just to give a few examples. Okay. And because of this leadership, because of all the money that the United States has invested in research, the country attracts so many international researchers. And so for this, as a PhD student, you get exposed to a really vibrant international community of research. And so in my current laboratory alone, just to give you an example, there are people from 6 different nationalities in one laboratory. And so that's unique. You get to learn different cultures, people think and work differently, and that diversity in itself is a real power behind the research strength in the United States, right? And so what are some other benefits? And a graduate degree from the United States, a PhD from the United States, is going to take you far. Right? It's going to be globally respected. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be from Harvard. It doesn't have to be from Caltech or Stanford or Berkeley. But a PhD from the US is going to take you far. And of course, this is true for many other countries as well. And if you don't believe me here, just look at who are the academic leaders in your countries now, and see where they got their degrees, right? And so you get top-notch research training. This makes sense. If the faculty are the leading experts, their training is also going to be top-notch. You get impactful publications because in addition to being a research powerhouse, the United States is also a publication powerhouse. And so a lot of there's so many scientific publication journals in the United States, and those journals are well known and well respected globally. That publishing your research in those journals, again, is going to speak volumes on your CV when you're looking for jobs and other opportunities. That vibrant and outstanding research community is also going to attract many research conferences. And so there is, gosh, I don't know the number actually. I'm gonna look it up next time. Maybe next year I'll have an estimate. But there's so many international research conferences that take place in the United States every year. And here I've given you an example here of one that I attend almost every year. This is the Cell Bio meeting, which brings together the American Society for Cell Biology, ASCB, and the European Molecular Biology Organization, or EMBO. And so you attend this meeting, you're meeting the finest cell biologists in the world, no question. And you can go and have coffee with these people, talk to them. And so a lot of people land jobs here. And there is over 5,000 people who attend this conference every year. So very rare. And it doesn't matter what research area you're in, there's probably going to be an international conference for you to attend in the United States, most likely. And so that allows you to integrate into the global research community. And so you're thinking beyond your local community, you're thinking globally. That's important. Even if you are trying to solve local problems in your research, it's very important to be globally minded. So this ensures also or helps secure your job, whether you want to go in private or public sectors, literally anywhere in the world, right? And so after I received my PhD, I could have gone and done a postdoc in Asia. I could have gone to Europe. I could have gone to Canada. I could have gone to Africa. It's the whole world becomes open for you. And so how do you get in? All right. So you need an undergraduate degree. As I mentioned earlier, you don't need a master's. You must have a good grade point average, generally 3.0 or above. For our graduate application mentorship, you must have this GPA. If you do not have it, we will ask you to write a statement to justify why your GPA is low. That's because in rare cases, you might be able to justify why your GPA is low if they are real life events that have interfered with your academic performance. But typically, your GPA is your handshake, meaning if you don't have the cutoff, they will not even read your application. You must have some research experience, right? I see someone here who is trying to sabotage us. Okay. Sumaya, if you can you remove the annotation privilege to the attendees? Please, if you're attending, stop subscribing on the screen. You're perturbing your colleagues. And when you do that, we might be able to identify who you are. And if we do, we will kick you out of all Afrisnet programs. So please be mindful and respectful. Thank you. Apologies about that. And so if you're coming from a non-English speaking country, you may also be required to show proof of English proficiency. So typically people who are in Nigeria, Kenya, increasingly now Ghana, you don't have to show proof of English proficiency. I'm hoping that more African countries that have education in English are also gonna make their case to universities that their students don't have English proficiency. This is something you can do. This is something you can make an impact on. So start advocating. If you are taking your undergraduate in English, this is the case, for instance, for people in Rwanda. I know the education is in English, but most people in Rwanda still have to take TOEFL or IELTS, right? And so go and speak to the leaders of your universities and ask them if they can advocate for you, right? If they can reach out to major universities in the world and let them know that the instruction is in English, that their students are proficient in English, right? I don't know exactly how that works, but I'm wondering that maybe if these schools really put themselves out there and advocate for their students, maybe there will be a change, right? These tests can be expensive, and in some cases can be the only factor that determines whether you apply to grad school this year or have to wait for a few years, right? I know that a number of students can struggle to come up with a few $100s. So the graduate record exam, the so-called GRE, is another standard test. I'm happy that it's now being waived by many programs. They've realized that it doesn't really reflect the competency of the student. And so I think it's very possible now to apply to graduate school in the US and target programs that have waived the GRE, and you'll still be able to find many programs to apply to that were not required to take the GRE. And so this is another general misconception. You can apply to graduate school before you complete your undergraduate. However, you must have your undergraduate degree before you start graduate school. What do I mean here? If you are starting your final year in August or September, that means you are going to complete your undergraduate degree by May next year. So if you want to start graduate school next year, this is your time to apply. You can apply this year. You can apply in the fall this year before you complete your undergraduate degree. However, you will not be able to begin graduate school next year unless you can show that you've completed your undergraduate degree. So they will request your transcript before you can start taking courses as a graduate student, but they will give you admission even if you've not completed your undergraduate degree by default. So I hope that is clear, and I'll probably touch on this again on Saturday. Most programs require an application fee. This has been a major challenge for many African students. It's a struggle that we are aware of. I'm trying to work with some Afrisnet mentors to see if we can support some students. It's not easy. All these people are volunteering, so we would have to have time to write grants towards that objective. My hope is that it's going to work as we collect information. This is another reason why, if you've received our email, please fill out those surveys that we send out. In order for us to get grants either for you or for the students behind you, we must have the data, right? We must know who is applying, how many schools you're applying to. That will help us in all these efforts, okay? The common application material, in other words, what do you submit in your application? You will be required to submit a transcript that shows where you are and your grades as an undergraduate student or a master's student. You need to show your English proficiency and standard test results if they are required. Some programs will ask you that the agency that offers the standard test transfers your grades directly to them. Unfortunately, that means you need to pay more money to the agency for them to transfer the the grades to the university. The standard tests are, I really still think they are all useless for someone going to graduate school. But that's what it is now, and it's good to be aware of that. You will be asked most likely to write some sort of personal statement or statement of purpose, and then also your CV. So once you're admitted, you receive an I-20 document or equivalent. So if you're coming on a J1 visa, you may get a DS 2019. If you're coming on an F1 visa, you get an I-20. I don't want to delve into the immigration matter. If you're curious about that, Afrisnet also has an annual event webinar where we invite a lawyer who breaks down all these visa types. So be on the lookout for that. This year's immigration webinar has already taken place, but we're gonna have another one next year. And if there is a lot of interest, we can also try to schedule another one in the fall. And so you need that document. You need the I-20 or the DS 2019 to apply for a visa and travel to the US. You need to secure housing, so where you're going to live when you get to the United States. Most schools have a system where you can look for and identify a roommate, so someone that you can share the rent with. And then most students are able to have their apartment leases, means apartment contracts, finalized before they come to the United States. So by the time you get here, your apartment is ready for you to move in, right? So once you get here, you also need to open a US bank account. Typically, you rotate in a few labs before you pick your own lab. And we are also starting a new annual webinar where we're gonna share tips and hints on how you can choose the right lab after your rotations. So this year's webinar is gonna be coming up. That's probably not relevant for you if you will be applying to graduate school soon. I just wanna make you aware that we will provide that information as well if you get admission letter. And then you select a thesis lab and of course start your research. Okay. So what do you do once you're in the lab as a graduate student? You take classes, right? You take courses, typically within your first 3 years. These courses are different, as I mentioned earlier. They'll be discussion-oriented courses, and they take to be offered in smaller classes, right? You're going to be doing research, right? So you're going to be reading a lot. You can never read enough as a graduate student. You're going to be doing a lot of reading, running experiments in the lab. You're going to be presenting your research typically to your lab on a regular basis. Depending on how big the lab is, you may have to present your research every month. So as a PhD student, I presented every month. Now I'm in a much bigger group. So I get to present my research every, typically 1 or 2 times a year. You also get opportunities to present your research within your university beyond your own laboratory, right? And so, for instance, as a PhD student, I was able to present my research to my entire department, and that's common in at most universities in the US. You will teach, so I had to teach as a PhD student. Most likely, you will have to. It tends to be mandatory in most graduate programs, especially graduate programs that are at universities that also have undergraduate programs. If you are at a medical center, for instance, you may not be required to teach. First, you're going to have life outside the lab, so this is important to keep in mind. You'll still be able to do things that you like. So I love to play soccer, so I had a group that I used to go and play with on campus as a PhD student. I love singing, so I also was in a choir at a local church that I attended. And any other activities that you like, most likely you're going to find people who do the same thing. And again, because the research communities here are very international, you will most likely be able to identify other Africans who are doing the same things you are interested in. So the people that I played soccer with, 90% of them were also from Africa, which was nice because we could get together and talk about, Africa. And some were from Rwanda, so we could even speak our mother tongue. And that's really really nice and another added value, right? And so, how do you find and conduct a thesis project, right? So right now you're just thinking, I want to get into graduate school. So my hope is that after this presentation, you're gonna add another line of thinking to your ideas, which is, what am I actually going to do as a graduate student? Because that's important. And as I said, having that understanding is going to be reflected as you are applying. When you don't have that grasp, it's clear in your application, and that can be the reason why you don't get admitted. So this is very important here, right? And so there are many ways you can get a thesis project as a PhD student or a master's student. In some cases, the students come in with ample knowledge about the research in the lab. And so they come in with a project in mind already. So they come in knowing what they're going to work on. In other cases, the principal investigator or the PI, which is here the leader of the research group, will present possible research projects and then you choose one. So that's what happened to me for my PhD. In other cases, the student comes and they are given a chance to explore possible options for a few months before committing to a specific project, right? So when I started my postdoc, for instance, this was the case. And in either way, regardless of how the project is assigned to you, as a student, you will be responsible for designing your experiments, right? You will be responsible for running the experiments. You will be able to, for the analysis of the results you obtain. You will be preparing the results for publication with, of course, support from your advisor, from your lab, and from the research community as a whole. And so the last bullet point is really what you will be doing as a graduate student. That's what you will be responsible for. The sooner you do this, the sooner you get your degree, right? So the good thing here is that once you're in the Afrisnet graduate community, we will also have webinars where we're going to share our experiences and information on how to do these things. And so we will invite experts, for instance, who are going to tell us how to publish our research, for example, right? And so as you move forward, as you finish your undergraduate, you should register for the AGPC already, and naturally you transition into that community. That's going to help you a lot, right? And so I told you I'll give you some teasers on my own research. And I told you you get a PhD because you've made novel discoveries. And so I did my PhD at Indiana University. It's arguably one of the most beautiful campuses in the United States. I put one picture here, and this is a bike lane on campus that I used to bike all the way to my apartment. And so, I didn't have to drive most cases. I could have driven if I wanted to, but it's also really, really beautiful campus. Above here next to this alley was the library and other, I believe the School of Global Sciences. Okay, so what did I do? I was studying the cell cytoskeleton. So I was in cell biology, and I was trying to understand the connection between the sort of cortex or the cytoskeleton that maintains the cell and cell division. And so I was able to use advanced microscopy. So in this case, I'm going to show you videos of the cells that I acquired. And in the red, you'll see that this cell is going to divide and become two cells. And the red fluorescent protein is kind of showing you when the chromosomes of the cell segregate into the two daughter cells. So play this again, really beautiful. So this is the normal cell, right? I would go in there and delete some genes, so perturb these cells, and that's how research works, right? So when you want to understand how a process works, you perturb it and see the outcome. And then you can get into the components of the system and say, if I take this component out, how does the system operate? So that's how you know which components are important for what process. And so now I just showed you here these beautiful round cells that are dividing. But notice what happened when I deleted some genes, right? This is one, what we would call a mutant, right? Just that weird looking daughter cell. And you see that that red actually breaks up in one cell instead of splitting into the two daughter cells as it's happening here, right? So this was a really exciting work, really exciting discoveries, again, using advanced microscopy, like in this case. I was using one of the newest microscopes that Nikon had put on the market. Nikon is a global power in microscopy. And this work was published in the Journal of Cell Biology. So anybody doing cell biology in the world, anybody doing cell biology in the world is going to know Journal of Cell Biology, right? And so if they see my work in this journal, they know that I probably did some relevant work in my PhD, right? So because of this work, I was inspired to continue to understand how cell shape regulates cell division. But for my postdoc, I wanted to do this in the context of cancer, right? And so as a postdoctoral fellow, and for those of you who don't know what a postdoc is, if these are people who have PhDs and they are receiving more training so they can start their own research laboratories. And so my goal is to become a research professor. And so I'm now receiving more training to prepare myself for that, to gain my research independence and also identify the research questions that I would work on as an independent researcher, as someone who is leading a research laboratory. So maybe in a few years from now, some of you will be my students. Who knows? That would be cool. And so now I'm using even more advanced microscopy, the so-called light sheet microscopes. If you've not heard of those, you should Google those and look them up. They're pretty cool microscopes. So you can already tell that I love microscopy. And I'm also able to collaborate with really advanced, really knowledgeable computer scientists who can take, this is a video of a cell that I took with a light sheet microscope, and a colleague was able to segment out the shape of the cell, and we can track proteins live in these cells. As you can see here, the change in the color is indicating different concentration of a specific protein that causes cancer in humans. And so what I'm trying to understand is now how is the shape of the cell regulating that protein, right? Is that protein more active here where we have these tiny protrusions on the cell, or is it more active here? Well, there seems to be no protein here anyways, but sort of the questions that I'm playing with, right? And so most of you in this meeting are Africans like myself. So I understand your challenges. I know it's hard. And that breaks my heart, as it breaks the heart of Sumaya, who is with me today, and many other volunteers who are helping us at Afrisnet. We are doing everything we can to help you, and we ask you to do the same, right? And so part of my message today is that if I did it, you can do it. And so here, my PhD advisor, Sonny Lacefield, whom I mentioned, was hooding me. That's the ceremony where they put this hood on your shoulders to sort of officially proclaim your PhD degree. It's a very exciting moment. This was one of the happiest moments in my life. And I'm looking forward to seeing many African students also get this opportunity. We still have very few PhDs in Africa, by the way. I don't know if anybody can guess. If you have a wild guess, put it in the chat. But I think it's something like 200 researcher per one person, right? That number goes up to like 5,000 when you get to the United States and in other developed countries. So we just also still need more Africans to get higher degrees and participate in research. We can help you, and that's the third webinar. We're going to tell you how we will help you if you are willing to apply to graduate school and you're ready, and again, you have a good GPA. But I already want to point you to the second GIS, which is again on Saturday, June 1st, not June 8th, as it said in the first email we sent. We will send out another email this week to clarify that. Although the flyer that we sent in that email, I believe, does have the right date. So again, I'm looking forward to seeing many of you. We have more than 100 people now on this Zoom meeting, so I'm looking forward to seeing many of you again on Saturday and spread the word. Let's have even more Africans join and learn about this. This is a very important webinar. So what we will do here is I'm going to discuss, I'm going to do the next presentation as well. I believe I may do the third one, maybe joined with a few other people. I want to sort of share my opinions. I've been working with African students like you since 2017 who are trying to get to graduate school. And so I understand the challenges. I know what's possible and what's not. So I want to share my humble, limited, albeit opinions on how you can boost your profile as a researcher. I want to share my ideas on how you can describe your research experience, no matter how small it is, in a manner that's going to be sensible, that's going to make sense to the graduate admission committees. And research is the same in the world. If what you say is sensible to a PI, a leader in research in the US, it's probably going to make sense to someone who's leading a lab in China or in Europe or in Australia or in Canada, right? I will discuss how you can identify the right graduate programs for you. Not every university is right for you, and it's important to know which ones are, right? And so for the people who are in our graduate mentorship program, there is cases where we've told them, don't apply there, period. You're wasting your time, you're wasting your money, right? So it's good to have that information, and you're gonna have that information on next Saturday. I'm gonna tell you how you can communicate with the research faculty. I get students who are telling me sometimes that they send emails to potential advisors, so research faculty in the United States, and they never get responses, right? So what I want to do is share my thoughts and knowledge on why you may not be getting any responses, and then tell you what you could do to increase the chance of actually getting responded to. I will also tell you that the response is not the only thing that matters. So I'll tell you why your communication to faculty is very important, and it still matters whether or not the faculty has responded. And I've chatted with professors who are served on admission committees. Some have shared their experience with me in terms of the applications they read from Africa, the problems they see, why they don't respond to emails, and so I'm going to share that with you as well. I'm also going to tell you how you communicate with graduate programs. This is different from communicating with the research faculty. In fact, in most cases, if you address a question that you should address to the graduate program, but you address it to the research faculty, you are already missing your target. This might be the only reason why the professor does not respond to you, because they already see that you don't know what you're doing. You still need more information, and they may not have time to give you that information. And remember, this is a very competitive process. So they already have 20 other emails that read much better than yours, right? And so we're gonna talk about the common application documents. I've mentioned a few already, like the statements of purpose, the CV, and I want to spend some time on how you can prepare those documents, make them look as best as you can make them communicate to the right people in the right way at the right time. And I'm also gonna bring some successful examples to share with you. And I'm going to share with you resources where you can go and read more about these documents and also read more examples yourself. Okay. And so that is all I had today. So I'm going to stop sharing now. If there is any slide that I need to go back to, I will go and put it up. But right now, I want to take about 10 to 15 minutes and see if you have any questions that I can hopefully answer. Once again, it was a great pleasure to see all of you. And you can raise your hand if you have a question. If you are in a loud environment, we have the Q&A open, so you can look on the bottom of your screen, click on the Q&A and type. Okay, sorry about that. I think by mistake, Sumaya had muted everyone. So now you should be able to hear me. The question is, are you able to unmute yourselves? I think by accident we muted everyone, so sorry about that. But so somebody put in the chat that you can unmute yourselves. I see many people who are telling me that I'm muted. Sorry about that. But I see some questions in the Q&A, so I'll do that. And if someone can put in the chat that Okay, so you can hear me. That's great. Can you unmute yourself though, if you want to speak? Thank you so much. So how can one tell if research is not for them? So in other words, how do you define your research interests? This is a very good question, and I want to delve into it more next Saturday, because that's part of how you apply to grad school. It's also defining your research interest. I'll share just a little bit here. Follow your passion. That's key, right? And so look at, if you've done research, look at the aspects of your research that has excited you the most, right? Did you, for example, enjoy your cell biology courses, right? If you're in engineering, did you love your survey courses, right? Did you have more fun when you were out on the field, or did you have more fun when you were in a lab doing experiments, right? So there is different types of graduate programs that will expose you differently to different aspects of your field. And so find out the parts, the elements of your coursework, either practical or theoretical, that gets you most excited, and focus on that. That's probably where your research interests are most likely. The other thing is, if you're in a place where there is some research, so research institutes, universities, professors who are doing research, I advise you to speak with those people. Ask if you can visit their lab. Ask them what they are working on. Ask them what they're doing and how they do it, right? That conversation could be what changes your life in some cases. It could also help you shape up your research interest, allow you to figure out what you like and what you don't like, okay? So Ibrahim, you have your hand raised. Are you able to unmute yourself?
Oh, yes, sir.
Hi,
Good
how
day,
are
sir.
you?
Hello, sir. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right. Thank you for the insightful section. I really appreciate that. And I have two questions. It seems the second question, I feel you'll be able to answer that in the next session. So the first question and the only question I want to ask is that about the applying to PhD directly, for someone that's just finished his undergraduate, and also applying directly from masters, those that finished masters. So I'm just thinking of, I have the opinion, but I'm not sure if I am wrong. I want you to ask that like differentiate the misconception also. Like, is it how easy, how difficult it is to apply from undergraduate, finishing as a fresh graduate, to your PhD? Then difference also, like finishing as a master's to your PhD. Is it not advisable to first finish your, like, go for masters before you apply to PhD? Or I hope you get that question, sir. That's
Yes,
mine.
yes. So I want to repeat the question, make sure I got it right. So you're asking, are there any differences between applying to a PhD from your undergraduate directly versus applying with a master's?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so there are some differences. A master's can give you an edge. It can give you an advantage. The first one is, if you are doing a master's, most likely you've engaged in research. So you already have research experience. So that's an advantage, right? But it's true that the admission committee is also going to say, yes, this person has a master's. So that's an added degree. Academically, that has value. But if you are an undergraduate who has research experience, then you can still get admitted even if you don't have a master's degree. So when I say that you can get admitted to a PhD with only an undergraduate degree, I'm not saying that you don't need a master's. I mean that a master's degree is useless for you to get into a PhD program. Okay. Something else that I should clarify here, students have reached out sometimes and they've said, well, I'm in my master's degree. It's not going to be done until 3 years and it's not going well. So I'm trying to get to a PhD. Don't do that. It's most likely not going to work for you. If you are trying to abort a program to go into another one, you have to justify why you are aborting your current program. And the first assumption that people are going to make is that you are not able to complete the program you are in now. And so if you can't complete the program you are in now, what guarantee can you give that you will complete the program that you are trying to get admitted into? So think about that. If you have studied a master's, finish it and then apply to a PhD. Okay, so again, a master's is important. It's going to help if you can get one, and especially if that master's is going to give you more research experience, right? But masters can be expensive and masters take time. So that's why when students can't get masters, but they have research experience, we tell them apply for a PhD, okay? This is another good one from Anita, who is in Ghana. So she's a master's student, and she's in computational genomics and biodata analytics. And she has a bachelor degree in, so she has a Bachelor of Science in Statistics, and she's interested in cancer cell biology for the PhD, right? No prior experience in the field. Is there a possibility she would succeed in the application? That's the question. So you right now, so first, cancer biology. I mean, cancer research. Cancer biology is a subfield of biology, and so from what I see, you are already doing biodata analytics, and you are in computational genomics. Both of these are subfields of biology as well. So what you are doing applies to cancer biology, right? Especially computational genomics applies very well to cancer biology. And so this is where, Anita, I highly recommend attending the session on Saturday, because one of the things I want to spend time on is to hopefully share my opinions on how you make your case, right? What the admission committee wants to see is what's the likelihood that you are going to succeed? And that's defined by two things: your passion, your interest, and of course, your background experience, right? Your background experience is not just defined by your bachelor degree in statistics. It's going to be defined by the projects that you are involved in now in your master's. So how do you tell that story is what's going to give you admission into a cancer biology PhD, right? If you come in and say, I want to do a PhD in cancer cell biology, then that may raise a question. But if you say, I want to come and do computational genomics in the cancer context, yeah, that makes sense, right? In fact, programs may like to see that because you are bringing in a new sort of added value to their program, right? And so I hope to talk more about that on Saturday. And you can always also shoot me an email if my answer is not complete or you want to learn more. I can't promise, but if I have time, maybe we can have a one-on-one meeting and discuss your case in specific, more specifics. Okay, Anita, I hope that helps. Otherwise, come on Saturday, shoot an email to info@afrisnet.org. And if we need to have a one-on-one, I'll try and make time for that. So my name is Emmanuel Opoku. He's at Cape Coast in Ghana. Thank you so much for your presentation. You're welcome. You said possible apply to PhD programs or you're done undergraduate or something. They ask whether you have publication. Oh, this is a good one. You don't need a publication for PhD admission. If anybody has told you that, they're lying to you, because I did not have any publication when I applied and received admission into multiple PhD programs. What you need is research experience, not publication. I've seen people with publications who don't get admissions. I've seen people without publications who get admitted. Again, the key is, what have you done as research? In other words, have you participated in a hypothesis-driven research project, right? Can you describe your research experience in a manner that presents the questions you're trying to answer, the methods you've used, the results you found, and the meaning of those results for you and for the scientific community, right? That's what these people are looking for. And then the rest is, how does your experience weigh against the other applicants? That is out of your control. You've done your job. The rest is in their hands, right? But you don't need a publication to get admitted into a PhD. I see your hand, Justice. I'll come back to you in a second. Is graduate school bound to result in academia? No, no. You can go into industry after your graduate. I mean, after graduate school, I have many colleagues who got their PhDs and now they are working for private companies. I stayed in academia because academia has a way of giving you more flexibility in what you do. So that makes the work more creative, which I think is more fun. But I also enjoy teaching, and that's more available in academic settings than it is in industry settings. But yeah, I have many colleagues who got their PhDs or even did their postdocs and still went to industry afterwards. The good thing with doing a postdoc in academia is that, or even if you are a professor and you want to go work in industry, it's still very possible. But if you've worked in industry for many years and you want to come and be a teaching and research professor, that can be a little more difficult, right? And so if I'm applying to a PhD program, that's carry. Oh, and the first question, the previous question was from Irenius Nyame, and this one is from Karikari Michela or Michaela. If I'm applying to a PhD program directly from my bachelor degree without a publication, what can I do for my application to be strong, I guess, stand out? What resources are available for students in health and wellness? So the first question is, as I mentioned earlier, you don't need a publication. What can you do to make your case stronger? Again, tell your story. Tell your research project in a manner that makes sense, right? I'm gonna come to this in more detail on Saturday, but what I see is that most students make the mistake of writing their research experience in a very grandiose manner. You would read the statements and you're like, wow, does this person have a Nobel Prize already? That's not what people are looking for. You want to tell your story in a precise, quantifiable manner. That's key. Quantifiable and trackable. When did you do that research project? Where, with whom? What came out of it? How did you do it? What does that mean for you? How is that project going to make you a better PhD student in our program? That's what the people are looking for. Publications they're not mandatory. Let me make that clear. There are graduate programs that I'm aware of that now look at publications, but it's not all of them. And I know for a fact that those programs will still admit students who do not have publications. And so in health sciences, I'm assuming you may be talking about like public health, wellness programs. In terms of resources for research, they are resources just as they are in any other field. What we see that tends to be different, for instance, in public health, is that there is less funding. There are some, but it's more limited compared to graduate programs in life and physical sciences or in engineering and mathematics, for example. But it's still possible. You're just going to have to search more exhaustively to find programs that have funding. Justice, you can unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I'm Justice Kwadutezin, and I completed my undergraduate in 2021,
Okay.
BSc Biomedical Science. And so I did a couple of applications for PhD because I was advised that my grades were good and I had research experience and everything was fine. So I put in a couple of applications and I was able to get some call to interview. So during the interviews, I was told that everything is fine. I had research experience, but there was no evidence for it. So at least I should have had one or two publications to show that actually what I have on the statement of purpose is true or something. So after the interview, I asked, I think the professor was from Sunny State, yeah. And so I asked that, what is the way forward? What is his advice for me? And he told me that I should take the year off, involve in more research projects, and then make sure I get one or two publications and I apply the next year, which was 2023.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then I've had a couple of 2 or 3 publications. Some are on their way coming, and I've decided to put in application this year. But I have also started masters here since I didn't want to waste my day. So I started masters here in the University of Cape Coast, Ghana, and I'm reading MPhil Infection and Immunity. So coming back, I want to know, should I still go with the undergraduate to PhD, or should I wait to finish the masters? I can finish the masters, but the award or the degree will not be available to apply. So I wanted to apply since I have the bachelor's degree and then the research experience and publications. I wanted to apply this year. So by the time I finish my project in the MPhil, I would have gotten admission into the PhD because time is not on my side. I'm growing, and then some age limits
Yeah.
going rough for me. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want your opinion on this.
Yeah. So first, I'm sorry for the unsuccessful applications. This allows me to say something. Let me start by the last thing you mentioned, so it's clear. I advise you to finish your master's for the reasons I mentioned. If you apply and you tell them that you want to get out of your master's, they are going to wonder why. And if they anything that they wonder about, but they don't have an answer for, they will use it against you. Remember, they have many other outstanding applicants who don't have the same problem as you, so they don't have to waste time on you. So if you are in a master's program and you can finish it, finish it. I guess my question for you, Justice, when will you finish your master's?
Yeah, so it's not that I'm dropping the masters.
Yeah. So when will you finish it?
I'll finish next year. So if I
So
apply this
like by what time? Or what month?
by August next year, I should finish my thesis.
Yeah, so go ahead and apply. Go ahead and apply. Like I said, you don't have to finish your current degree to begin the application, right? What matters is
Okay.
that by the time you begin your PhD, you've completed your master's. Okay? So in your statement, you write that you are currently pursuing a master's degree. You want to say why you decided to do that master's, something better than you didn't want to waste your time. Again, it has to be an
Okay.
intellectual interest, right? And you must be able to then tell them that it's going to be done by August 2025, so they know by the time you begin your PhD, you will have your master's degree completed. Okay.
Yes,
What if your
I get it.
master's? What if your master's is not done? That's fine. Once you have an admission, you can defer it to the next year, but you have it. That's a possibility, right? Now, back to your first question with the publications. Like I said, there are programs that require publications, but it's not all of them. And I also know programs who will admit mostly students with publications, but they will still take applicants who don't have publications if those applicants are really outstanding. The challenge that you all my fellow Africans face, unfortunately, is that the folks here don't have a way to vet your credentials sometimes, and so um, uh, we are trying to help with that through Afrisnet. There is a new program that we're going to launch soon that I hope many of you will join. That's going to help, which we're going to try and put you, elevate you more on the spotlight so graduate programs can see you sooner and earlier. That should help. But what you can also do is find people to speak on your behalf, right? And so that's important. Why, if you've written in your statement that you have research experience, the person who supervised you on that research project should write a recommendation letter for you. That's very, very important. Okay. So when I applied for my PhD, the people who had supervised me for my relevant research experiences all wrote recommendation letters for me. And so in that case, if a colleague in the United States with a PhD is not going to trust a colleague with a PhD from Africa, that's their problem. That's not your problem. And I hope we can get to a point where we say that's not professional on their side. They should have some level of trust, right? And also, the reason that they told you should go back and do more research, I'm tending to say that their problem was that maybe they thought your research experience was still a little bit limited, rather than the lack of evidence for research experience. But those are my opinions. And your question, Justice, also leads me to saying this. We always encourage students to apply to as many programs as they can. The reason why we do that primarily is because these admissions are highly subjective. It's people who read your applications. They are humans, and humans, anything they do will be subjective. It's going to be affected with all human strengths and weaknesses as you know them, right? And so you may have a group of 3 to 5 people who are trying to make a decision whether or not they should admit you. And they will come in with their subjectivity, right? And so it's very possible sometimes that people apply. That did happen to me actually. You apply to multiple programs, and a program that is ranked like 50 places below rejects your admission, and a much more outstanding program gives you admission. So how do you explain that, right? There's no formula. You just have to boost your research experience as much as you can, target multiple programs, and also remember that sometimes it takes a few application cycles before you can land your admission, right? I like that a lot of the questions today are really pointing towards the webinar on Saturday. So I'm looking forward to it, and a lot of these points that were raised, I'll be able to cover. So what do you mean by research experience? If possible, you should highlight in your next webinar how to explain the key research experience, because when it comes, yeah, so that's the first point that I put on the list that we're going to talk about. And I know also that there is there is limitations and challenges to the research that you can do and be exposed to in Africa, Obed. So I know that it's a big challenge. What I hope to do is to tell you whatever you're doing, how relevant is it? And if you feel like it's not sufficient, what else can you do to sort of boost your profile? So that's what I'm going to do on Saturday. But what do I mean by research experience is that you've spent some time participating in a research project, which, as I said earlier, a hypothesis-driven inquiry that follows scientific methods as we know them, right? And so someone chose to call themselves anonymous participant, but they still have a question. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. You're welcome. I'm yet to define my research interests. I just completed my undergrad and picking any PhD program is spending over 5 years in a field that I may not be interested in later. So so a good question. Someone who just completed their undergrad, they're not sure about their research interests, and they was asking, should they do a master's or a PhD? It sounds to me like a master's would be the best choice for you. If you don't know your research interests yet, and that may open the possibilities. If you can, I would also say rotate in a few labs if you are able to. You can always shadow people. You can ask them if you can see what type of experiments they're doing and how they're doing it. Spend a few days with them, do that in a few labs, speak to the people who are doing the research, take them out to lunch, go out and share a meal with them, have breakfast with them, or invite them for a brief meeting. That will help you sharpen your interest. If that still doesn't work, maybe trying a master's in the broad area that you're interested in would help you define your interest for the PhD. Okay. So it's been nearly 2 hours since we started. I think we should conclude. Good questions, great interest, a really good attendance today. So I hope to see many people again next Saturday. If you have any other questions, I see that there are a few that are still popping up in the Q&A. Write them down and you can ask them on Saturday. So I'll give you a chance to ask questions that are related to either Saturday's session or today's session. It sounds like most questions today were relevant for next week's presentation. So hopefully a lot of those topics will be touched on already. I'll just get in more details. Once again, thank you so much. I'm happy, excited to see so many young Africans that are passionate and excited about research and are really doing a lot to get into research. I know many of you are spending a lot of money through these applications. They are expensive, so that's remarkable. Thank you for doing that. I'll say that as a scientist, thank you for trying to offer your contribution to the scientific community, but also thank you for making all your efforts to get more Africans on the global playground in terms of research. But most importantly, I hope that you're doing this not just to get a graduate degree, but because you are truly passionate about research. That's what's going to make the real difference. I hope to see many of you again on Saturday. At the same time, we are going to send a few email reminders. And again, we will send a different Zoom link. And follow the most recent emails. They're going to contain the most accurate information. And you have any questions, feel free to reach out. For the people who asked questions, Justice, I believe, Anita as well, your cases sound a little interesting, a bit maybe more nuanced. So if you want to reach out for one-on-one with me, WhatsApp call or a Zoom call, shoot an email to info@afrisnet.org. Or you can also go on our website and say, there is a contact us menu. If you send a message there, that should work. Or just come back on Saturday and let me know, and we'll do what we can to help. And so I look forward to seeing you all on Saturday. Thank you so much for joining today. And again, kudos for your interest and efforts to get into more research.